Hello, this Hangout on Air is live. Oh, well, this morning for this Dawn Busters Taste Challenge, we have Bellows Club Whiskey. And Bellows Club Whiskey is from, well, this bottle is from 1994, and this is from Jim Beam Company. Now, but it wasn't started by them. Okay, so Bellows was founded in 1830 as like a whiskey merchant, kind of like Justerini and Brooks, J&B over there in England. Not really a producer, but a buyer and seller, a handler. Okay, fine, nothing wrong with that. A lot of companies do that. They made their own whiskeys or had their whiskeys made. And then over time, the family, I guess, wanted to sell, and so they sold to Jim Beam. And then Jim Beam turned around and sold it to Luxco, apparently after the Beam Suntory buyout, So now Bellows blended and straight bourbon whiskeys are Luxco brands. I bought this old 25-year-old bottle it was unopened, of course, liter bottle at International Market for $8.99. Yeah, I think it was $8.99 for the bottle. Something like that. So we're gonna put this up against another odd item. Which may not be produced anymore. I don't think it is. Albertsons American Blended Whiskey. Nice label, brown and gold with white lettering. I don't know when this whiskey hit the market. I know that the company Albertsons, the grocery chain, was founded in 1939, 80 years ago. Now, when they started having their own whiskey brands produced, I don't know, but a viewer told me he worked for a distributor back in the early 1970s, 50 years ago, nearly 50 years ago, and they had this. Wouldn't shock me. I know Winn-Dixie has been having their own liquor brands for decades. Now this 750 milliliter bottle was only $4.99. True story, $4.99. And it's better than you would think for $4.99. Now, is it really good, enjoyable, great, fantastic? No. Is it horrific filth? No. It's better than $4.99, but it's nothing to get excited about. I was excited to buy it just because it's so strange, and I figured could be something I never see again. And I noticed it was on closeout or clearance. But you can't put much emphasis on that because Albertsons is always like saying, oh, a big sale, and it'd be like a sale that lasts forever on some of these brands. So you're never quite sure if they're getting rid of it or it's just something that make you think it's a big deal. But I never did see it again after that. Same thing with the Albertsons brandy. It was there, and the only Albertsons branded liquor I still see is the gin, and that could just be old bottles that have never sold yet. And I noticed after they got rid of the Albertsons brandy and the Albertsons whiskey and the Albertsons everything else, that almost immediately all these other items started coming in. Okay, like this, I can't remember the name of the whiskey. It's a bourbon whiskey. I can't remember the name. Some old-timey Kentucky name, a man's name. I could buy the bottle. It's like, oh, I don't know, $10.99. It's probably the same thing or nearly the same thing as Ancient Age because it's the same bottle design. It's made by the same people, Buffalo Trace and everything. Then when the Albertsons brandy disappeared, D.W. Anders brandy appeared like that quick, but it was different. It tasted like the Hartley brandy. So I think the answer for all of that is that Albertsons, the Albertsons store chain is a bunch of store chains now. It's owned by a holding company. So they own a bunch of different chains. Super Value, Safeway, Bonds, Jewel Osco, Amigos down in Texas. So it's they don't want to sell Albertsons whiskey at Jewel Osco, so they come up with these other brands, right? Like D.W. Anders, and then there you go. That's my theory, and I think it's a good theory. Does it matter in the world? Does it matter to this whole world? No. But it's interesting in the context of the private label brands and all of that. Let's see. Well, I'm waiting for dawn. It's still dark. I thought, well, I see a little glimmer of blue in the sky, and I mean a little glimmer. Okay, well, so we have gold and gold. So they're the same color, gold and gold. Oh, what about the aging? I do believe that both are no age statement, which means at least 4 years. Straight whiskeys in this product are 4 or more years old. Now, they're telling you right there, there's the statement. They don't have to give that statement, because if they don't bother mentioning it, by default, this is the law, by default, it has to be at least 4 years old. Well, they just, as a courtesy, putting it on the bottle. So 4-year-old age, 20% straight whiskey, more than likely Jim Beam, and 80% grain neutral spirits. In other words, just moonshine, corn liquor, grain whiskey, corn distillate, whatever you want to call it, odorless, colorless, it's a base. And that's, if you read about blended whiskey, you'll understand that that's how that works. They take grain whiskey, could be a combination of many, could be many, aged different years. The grain neutral spirits is unaged, however. It's just freshly produced, fresh grain alcohol. And they dilute it down to 80 proof, and then they start blending it with various bourbon whiskeys, or in Scotland, straight, single malt whiskeys. In Canada, various rye whiskeys, malt whiskeys, could be corn high wine, corn high wine, rye high wine, and various blending wines, and brandy and bourbon. So this could have up to, these both could have up to 2%. And we're talking about the United States, up to 2% blending sherry. In Canada, it could be up to 9% distilled spirits and aged wine. You say, well, it sounds complicated. It's not too complicated. Okay, so this one says, we love to hear from our customers, and they give you a number. Info at Barton Brands. So there we go. That's telling us that Barton Distilling was doing this contract for Albertsons years ago. But, you know, Barton got bought out by Sazerac 10 years ago, and they just kept that name. It says right here, the Albertsons logo and trademark owned by Super Value and its subsidiaries. And it says right there, 80% grain spirits. What kind of grain? Well, it could be any kind of grain, but in America, in Canada, and Scotland, Ireland, it's generally maize, corn, the cheap government subsidized grain. Now, should the government be subsidizing grain? That's for another argument for another day. American blended whiskey, matured in American oak. Yes, it is aged, and there's no age statement, so that means at least 4 years. It says bottled by County Line Distillers, Louisville, Kentucky. Now, some of you that kind of monitor these whiskeys, County Line is one of those alias names for Sazerac. Doesn't say distilled in Louisville, though, does it? I don't even think Sazerac has a distillery in Louisville. It's just a bottling plant. Where is it distilled? We don't know. But the lady at Barton, who's owned by Sazerac, when I was at Barton Distillery, that is a distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, she told me that their grain neutral spirits come from Lawrenceville, Indiana, at the old Seagram's plant, Midwest Grain Products. And she showed me their old column still. She said, well, we don't use this anymore because it's cheaper, more efficient for them to just get it made for them by MGP, Midwest Grain Products, who does a lot of that for a lot of companies. They'll even make you bourbon, like pure bourbon. And that's the dirty little secret of craft whiskey. A lot of the craft whiskeys are not, there's nothing wrong with that, but they're not made by hand in a little quaint distillery in Kentucky. They're made mass produced at Midwest Grain Products, the old Seagram's distillery founded in 1847 in Indiana. And then they may only be blended and aged in the craft distillery. And anyway, handcrafted is not a legal term, so many of these products say handcrafted, but it might be handcrafted on an assembly line. All right, whoa. A lot of craft brewers in beer have their products made for them by contractors, like FX Matt, Saranac in Utica, New York. Does Brooklyn Brewery make good craft beers? Yeah, I like them, but they're not made in Brooklyn. Generally, they're made in Saranac. I mean, at Saranac, Utica, FX Matt Brewery, contract. It's a mass production place, big regional brewer like Dixie down in New Orleans used to be, or Yingling, and so on and so on. Pearl was a big one over there in Texas. We used to have Jackson, New Orleans, but most of the regional breweries died out because of the fierce competition from the mass-produced breweries. So they died out and were bought out, you see. And the same thing happened in the liquor world. The regionals couldn't compete, so they died out or got bought out. In most cases, got bought out. Will this be much of a challenge? You know, I don't believe so. Even though they're both aged at least 4 years, and they're both an 80-20 blend, 80% grain alcohol, grain neutral spirits. Some people call it brown vodka. And 20% straight whiskey, almost certainly bourbon. And even though Sazerac brands tend to, from what I've experienced, tend to have a much higher rye content than your other bourbons, I still don't think it's going to be a challenge, because I think the what's it called, the Bellows club whiskey has a very strong, you could say almost offensive, harsh, repellent rye note. It was almost if someone at the distillery in 1994 said, let's do a joke. Let's just go crazy and just make it 20% straight rye whiskey and see if anybody notices. Let's take old Overhaul. Isn't that, I don't know if that's 100% rye whiskey. And then just because you think, oh no, this cannot be, it can't just be regular old Jim Beam bourbon blended into it. Now it does have some Jim Beam characteristics, like say that greenwood, that cellar mold oddity. But Alex the Beer Master, good morning, Ron. Good morning to you, Alex. Good to hear from you. Okay, so I don't think it's going to be much of a challenge, but we're going to find out right now. I don't have to worry about the color because they look the same. And a neighbor down the street, he said he wants to do these whiskey reviews with me. And I said, you don't mind going on air, you know, being on YouTube? Oh, no, he didn't mind. He's from Nicaragua, and he said, well, down there, it's all Scotch. Like, they all drink Scotch. And I read about that. Latin America and East Asia, South Asia, they love Scotch. Scotch. Japan, all the Japanese whiskey is a Scotch mimic. Scotch. So his favorite is Dewar's. And then he had the Dewar's 12-year. And he said, I don't have much left in either bottle. Is that enough for reviews? I said, I think so. I said, you got to restock, though. He said, I will. So he wants to do, so get ready. I've never had Dewar's in my life. Okay. The Dewar's white label's been on the market since 1899. And the Dewar's 12 year has been on the market for, oh, I don't know. They said it was the 6th generation of the family. So maybe in the 80s or even later. I don't know. I couldn't find out. Doesn't really matter. And they said it's double age. Well, if it's double age, that would mean that the white label is what age? 6 years? I don't know. You might know more about Dewar's than myself. They had a lot of tasting notes on their website, but no history really, or they didn't really talk much about the ingredients. Except they said it was up to 40 different grain whiskeys and single malts. They talked about the single malt that they built it upon and all of this, and how they marry them in the cask, and then they age it again in another cask some kind of way. I don't know. They claim it makes it different and better. Well, if you get on any Scotch website, they all say that. You know, we do ours this way, which makes it so much better. All right. It probably doesn't make it better. It's just different. But I'm curious to try it, so be on the lookout for some duo reviews for Dewar's. This one smells nice and fresh. You know, neither one of these bottles are fresh, but it just has a fresh grain farm, like a farm, a Midwestern farm, you know, west of the Appalachian Mountains and east of the Mississippi River, right? The New West. Well, you know, in 1783, that was the New West. If you were going out west in 1783, that meant you were going to Kentucky and Indiana, all right? The Northwest Territories and the Southwest Territories. All right. It's a full nose of grain, corn, not really corn bread, but maybe corn muffin or corn meal, maybe. Like you almost want to pass this through some egg and then batter a catfish and fry it. And there's some sweetness and there's some nectar like you would have in a flower or honeysuckle and wood. I have to admit, there is some wood. Now, after 4 years, you'll pick up some wood. Are these colorized? Did they add caramel color, which is allowed with American blended whiskeys? I don't know, because I think in 4 years, you would have this color. You get this color in 2-year bourbon. So, and bourbon cannot have coloring added. So I think it's probably not. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think it's colorized. Colorized, you know. But not computer generated color like on television, but caramel generated color. I don't think so. Oh well, there's the club whiskey, y'all. That fast, I know. That you saw how fast I sniffed it and got it? Imagine that. There's no doubt this has got to be the club whiskey. I don't know how they could have such a complex nose and flavor with this simple 80-20 blend. I don't know how that's achieved, or I should say was achieved, or maybe still achieved because I got the Bellows whiskey in the cabinet, the modern version. This one here is just spicy. I mean, spicy like, oh, wow. What's up with the rye, man? And a lot of wood, char barrel. You say, but it's used barrels. Yeah, I know that, but there's still some char coming through. Now, as you sniff on it, it does dissipate. You see, you let these things swirl around and whatnot. But ooh. Okay, hey. Time for the taste challenge. Ready? I'm ready. Yeah, you see, wood, yeah. A little rye, that Sazerac Buffalo Trace rye note. but it's like a flat flavor. I don't mean, you know what I mean? It's like a flat, there's a little melon even with that Heaven Hill type melon, but this is not Heaven Hill. And then, like my friend David said when he tried it, he said, it tastes like corn whiskey, which makes perfect sense because that's what it is. Almost 100% corn of various states. You got me? Various states of corn. So this is pretty bland, I'm sure by design. Who buys Albertsons and does taste challenges and swirls it around in this Glencairn glass and does all that? Nobody. You say they buy it, mix it with Sprite, and drink it on the way to work. That's a grim example, but probably an accurate one. For $4.99 a bottle, think. Then you'll. Very simple, very basic, very bland. It's like if you took Buffalo Trace and you just blanded it, and some people say, well, that's kind of bland itself. Some people will make that argument. Yeah, well, just think of Buffalo Trace blanded out, watered down, even though it's 80 proof. Just neutralized. I wouldn't run from it. It's not repellent, but I certainly wouldn't run towards it. I would be indifferent to it, as is the world at large. And it probably doesn't exist anymore on the market. All right. This one can push your weight up. I don't know. I don't know what is going on over here with this Bellows Club whiskey. I mean, now we have to admit it's distinct because with that fast of a whiff, a half-second whiff, you know it's Bellows Club whiskey. So it's distinct. But golly gee, it has a harsh rye note. It has a heavy charred wood, but like a cutting, like like a meat cleaver. Eee. I don't know. It seems stronger than 80 proof. I know it's not. It says right here. Does it say there? Yeah, 80 proof. But I don't know what's in this witch's brew. Whoa, 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 whoa. So if I was looking to drink blended whiskey, and I wouldn't be really, but for the sake of argument, let's just say that I was, I'd be reaching for the Albertsons over the Bellows, because the Albertsons, as dull as it is, at least it's sort of mellow and just, it's there. You know what I'm saying? It's just laying there, lazy. It's a little sweet. It's quite bland, like corn, a corn murmur. I think that's how you could describe Albertsons American blended whiskey. It's like a corn murmur. I don't think anybody's ever described the whiskey as a corn murmur, but that's what it is. This one is like Mary Yellen. Not Mary Ellen, Mary Yellen. It screams things. What are the things? It's got to be the rye. I don't know what else could it be? You say they can use any kind of grain as long. That's right. They could use any kind of grain. If you read the government website, any kind of grain to make the distilled liquid. But what did they use? Rapeseed or canola? People, I think canola and rapeseed is the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, what grain did they use? Can't be wheat. Never tasted corn like that. Maybe it's Indian corn or some kind of blue corn or something. I don't know what it is, but it's bizarre. I'll tell you one thing. If you want to try a whiskey that's bizarre, strange, confusing, unforgettable, memorable, unique, like being cut with a knife, not a sharp knife. I don't know what I'm even saying. That's how much of a conundrum this causes. But if you want to try something that confusing and perplexing and odd and strange and weird, try this. This is the oddest whiskey I've ever tried this side of King Square from Auburndale, Florida. That's another weirdo whiskey. I mean, weird. Well, that won't be any kind of taste challenge. That thing is so pale. If they were supposed to add caramel color, someone forgot. Oh, baby. We'll get to that one down the road next week. I think it'll be next week. It's almost like a fruit stripe gum, you know, with the zebra. You know that's not right. I better stop while I'm ahead because I'm not even ahead. I think I'm behind it. I'm behind already in my description, but I don't know what to say about it. I guess Albertsons wins. Tastes a little better. I think maybe. I think I gave it a good solo review anyway years ago, didn't I? Anyway, it's $4.99 for the bottle. That's $8.99. So you could figure out you're getting a little better value, if one should call this a value, for Albertsons. Okay, so I've got some other taste challenges coming up if you care to watch them, because it's going to be the same story, repetitive, it's going to be replicated. It's going to be Bellows Club Whiskey versus what's that other one I've got in there? I got Ancient Age Preferred. I've got Barton. Yeah. Another one of those Sazerac brands. Oh, yeah. 75 South, which is an Albertsons. That's the Albertsons brand that replaced the Albertsons 75 South. And then that weird name one replaced the Albertsons bourbon. Now, the King Square is going to be odd versus weird. You know what I mean? It's going to be weird versus odd, odd versus weird. So that's going to be a confusing one. But it won't be any kind of challenge because you'll never confuse those two. And then we'll close it out with Seagram's 7 Crown. And you won't confuse those two. The 7 Crown is going to kill this. It's going to destroy it. Seagram's 7 Crown is going to tell you why it's the #1 selling blended whiskey in the United States. American blended whiskey. You know why? Because it's the best one. You say, but that's $12 a bottle. It ought to be. It's way better than this other stuff I deal with. It's just clean and it's done right and it tastes like it ought to taste. You know what I mean? It's like they didn't cut corners. It's a blended whiskey for people that aren't alcoholics. You know what I mean? All this other stuff is, oh, well. Jeff Knapp says, good morning, Ronald. These Bellows challenges have been interesting. I agree with that. Troubling in a way, but interesting. Fascinating, weird. Oh, well, if you ever see a bottle of Bellows Club whiskey, I would recommend that you buy it because you'll never taste anything like it. Now, I'm not saying you'll like it. You probably won't enjoy it. But then you will find it's unique. You can't say, oh, that tastes like, nah. That doesn't taste like anything else. I said Jim Beam because I knew it came from Jim Beam. If I had known that, would I be talking about it? Maybe not, probably not. See, you can be influenced by these things. The Albertsons, yeah, tastes like all the rest. Are similar to the Barton, the Ancient Age Preferred, the 75 South, the all of that. It's coming from the same people. They use the same process, probably very similar ingredients, if not identical ingredients. So it's got that Sazerac house style. This, I don't know. Okay, enough of that. Well, I'm planning in 2 days to go against 75 South, and you can get 75 South, and it's about $6.50, which is extraordinarily cheap this day and age. And then we'll do the Barton. You can get Barton still about the same price, $6.50 a bottle, assuming you can find it. We don't get it here. And then we'll do the King Square, which you can buy at Specs in Texas. Don't know where else you can buy it. It's extremely cheap. Same thing, about $6.50 a bottle. It's got an odd blend ratio, and it's aged. It's a strange one. I'll leave it at that. And then the Seagram 7 Crown, which has no age statement, meaning it's aged at least 4 years. Seems like it's longer. When you taste it, it seems like it might be 6. Costs more. Blended at a better ratio and tastes way better. Yeah. So far in these taste challenges with blended American blended whiskey, the only one that has come close to Seagram 7 Crown in quality, I think, has been the Beam's 8-star, and that was the older one, the 75-25 blend, aged. I think it used to be 3 years. Now it's 2-year age, and it's 80-20, but it still has some characteristics that are mitigating. You know what I mean? It has some mitigating circumstances. In other words, the flavor and the aroma. Any others that come close? The Kessler, still made by Beam Suntory. I think the Kessler did well, but I only had a small couple of bottles. And McCormick was different, had some. And I think the only Sazerac brand that really couldn't really compete, but could rival it to some extent was Carstairs. The Man Who Cares drinks Carstairs. Carstairs aged 4 years or more. Oh, and the Club 400 might. So with Sazerac, the only ones that can kind of compete with Seagram 7 Crown would be the Carstairs and the Club 400. And then, but there isn't much out there. And then I haven't had one yet, I don't think, that beat Seagram 7 Crown. Can't think of any that defeated it. So, hey, well, if it wins the trophy, it wins the trophy, right? All right, so stay tuned for more adventures at dawn. And once we're finished with the American blended, then it's back to Scotch. Yes, be on the lookout for J&B solo review. I did Just Ernie and Brooks. Oh, I couldn't get over that one. That was really a fascinating. Okay, I won't say fascinating again. I'll latch on to certain words, right? It was exquisite. It was exquisite. All right, thanks for watching this video production.